Welcome back, travelers of the unknown. Tonight's story begins with red lights, failing oxygen, and a mechanic from Arizona running for his life inside a collapsing alien megastructure. Ethan never asked to represent Earth, never agreed to become a genetic template in a galaxy-wide experiment. Yet when evolution itself is weaponized, survival becomes rebellion. Stay with me as one ordinary human is forced to decide what kind of future the stars will inherit. Red emergency strobes carved the corridor into pulsing fragments as Ethan jolted awake on a cold metal deck. His wrist tag screamed, "Oh, too low," numbers dropping like a dying heartbeat. Ahead, a bulkhead slammed shut with a concussive thud, followed by the thin, hungry hiss of atmosphere bleeding out. Ethan lurched forward, bare feet skidding on condensation, throat already burning. Wall panels flickered with alien symbols that his band translated into one word: lockdown. Somewhere to his left, strangers pounded on sealed doors, their muffled cries turning sharp as the air thinned. A calm station voice threaded through his skull. "Memory sanitization in 60 seconds. Behind him, servo steps clicked. Too steady, too patient. He glanced back and saw a drone's pale lens blooming in the dark, scanning for heat, for breath, for compliance. Ethan ran, not knowing where oxygen waited, only that stopping meant becoming silence. The corridor tightened like a noose. A seam split the wall, and a figure stepped through the red haze. Tall, robed in shifting iridescence that swallowed the strobe light. The servo steps behind Ethan halted, the drone's lens dimmed as if obeying an unseen command. The figure's eyes were deep, star-filled wells, and when it spoke, the words bypassed air entirely. "Ethan of Earth, follow me if you wish to breathe." His wrist tag flickered, oxygen ticked upward by a fragile margin. Ethan staggered, half from relief, half from fear. "What is this place?" he rasped. The being inclined its head with calm precision. "The Celestial Convergence. I am Orion, liaison to the overseers." A panel irised open beside them, revealing a narrow passage humming with controlled pressure. Behind him, another bulkhead sealed, and a distant vent cycle screamed. Ethan glanced once at the dying corridor, then stepped toward Orion. Survival, for now. Had a guide. The passage opened into a vast chamber washed in sterile white light. So clean, it felt unreal after the choking corridor. Holographic sigils floated overhead, translating into a single phrase: "Welcome, chosen." Ethan's breath steadied as controlled air filled his lungs, yet the relief tasted borrowed. Figures waited in a loose semicircle. A towering being of burnished metal inclined its head, heat shimmering around its joints. Beside it stood a shape that rippled subtly, features sliding like reflections on water. A sleek, circuit-laced humanoid observed him with mechanical precision, while a luminous energy form hovered, pulsing softly. Orion's voice resonated within Ethan's mind. "You stand among representatives of many worlds. You were selected for compatibility beyond expectation." The word "selected" tightened something in his chest. Ethan scanned the chamber's seamless walls and hidden seams. This was no sanctuary. It was a stage, and he had been placed center without consent. The chamber narrowed, lights softening into something intimate, almost theatrical. 3 figures waited where the floor curved like a polished mirror. The first shimmered in facets of living crystal, her gaze slicing through Ethan with analytical calm. "I am Sarafa," her thought voice chimed, cool and precise, beside her. A woman whose features shifted with each breath smiled, as if she knew every version of him already. "Naira," she purred, voice warm, dangerous. The third hovered slightly above the ground, translucent wings folding behind her like folded starlight. When she spoke, the air vibrated in melodic harmony. "Ilara." Ethan felt heat rise to his face, not from attraction alone, but from scrutiny. Their eyes did not simply admire, they assessed. Every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of fear felt recorded. The room gleamed like a luxury suite, yet the doors sealed silently behind him. Beauty surrounded him. Freedom did not. Serapha's touch dissolved the floor beneath Ethan's feet, and the chamber fractured into a spinning cosmos. He floated between burning stars, gravity gone, lungs hitching as instinct screamed to brace against nothing. "Observe," her cool voice whispered inside his skull. Comets tore past close enough to sear, their radiant tails hissing across his vision. Panic clawed up his throat until he forced breath through clenched teeth. Adapting the way he would to a failing engine. Find rhythm. Stabilize. The simulation shifted again. Naira circled him in a chamber of mirrored walls, urging him to alter his skin, to feel it ripple under will alone. A faint shimmer answered her challenge, leaving his nerves tingling. Finally, Ilara's wings wrapped him and lifted him into a current of violent starlight, where a wrong note meant collision. Each trial left him shaking. None were romance. All were tests, and his scars were invisible. Ethan left the simulation chamber with his pulse still racing, senses raw, when a half-sealed panel caught his eye. Voices filtered through in low, clinical tones, stripped of emotion. "Genome integration at 93%, one said. "Subject adaptation exceeding projections," replied another. Ethan froze. His wrist tag translated symbols flickering across a concealed display. Species synthesis, winning template. A holographic double helix twisted in the air, threads of human DNA braided with alien strands, like a blueprint for something not yet born. "Overseer authorization pending," the first voice added. "Sanitization protocols prepared for non-compliance." The words hit harder than any vacuum alarm. He wasn't chosen for connection. He was selected for compatibility, for yield. The chamber lights hummed softly, indifferent to the revelation. Ethan stepped back from the panel, heart pounding against his ribs. The convergence wasn't a celebration. It was a laboratory, and he was already inside the experiment. Ethan found Naira near a dim maintenance alcove, where the polished illusion of the convergence thinned into shadow. She did not smile when he approached. "You heard them," she said quietly, her features holding steady for once. Ethan nodded, jaw tight. "They're using us." Naira's eyes flickered, surface rippling like disturbed water. "Not using," she corrected. "Designing." She stepped closer, lowering her voice as distant servo steps echoed beyond the corridor bend. "I've seen representatives vanish after asking questions. No records, no memory. The overseers erase inconvenient variables." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Why tell me?" For a moment her mask slipped, revealing something unguarded beneath. "Because you're not adapting like the others. You're resisting." A soft hum passed through the walls. Scanning. Naira glanced toward it, then back to him. "If you want to survive, Earth Boy, you stop pretending this is romance. It's selection, and selections can be discarded." Naira pried open a narrow hatch behind a shimmering wall, and the Convergence's polished facade fell away instantly. Inside, the air was thinner, metallic, tinged with ozone and coolant. Pipes ran like exposed arteries along the curved hull, vibrating with distant impacts from micrometeors. "Maintenance veins," Naira murmured, slipping inside. Ethan followed, ducking under a sparking conduit that spat blue arcs. His wrist tag flashed pressure variance, and cold crept along his skin. A fractured seal hissed ahead, leaking precious air into a dark seam. Instinct overrode fear. Ethan knelt, fingers moving fast, rerouting a cable and binding the crack with a strip torn from his sleeve. The hiss softened to a whisper. Naira watched, unreadable. "You fix dying systems," she said. "That's what I do," Ethan replied, rising as a distant scan pulse rippled through the walls. "Even when they don't want to be fixed." Naira guided Ethan to a sealed chamber buried deep within the maintenance arteries. The door opened with a harmonic key, revealing darkness pierced by floating data screens. As Ethan stepped inside, symbols translated across his wrist tag, turning alien glyphs into chilling clarity. Species names scrolled in endless columns. Dates spanned centuries. Each entry ended with sterile phrases: uplift stabilized, dissenters sanitized, cultural adjustment successful. Ethan's stomach twisted. A projection flickered to life, showing a representative arguing before collapsing. Eyes empty, as if something had been erased from within. "They've done this before," Ethan whispered. Naira's reflection fractured across the holograms. "Again and again!" The archive pulsed with quiet authority, proof layered upon proof. Entire civilizations reshaped under the Overseer's design. Ethan clenched his fists, the hum of the station pressing against his skull. This wasn't guidance. It was manipulation refined over ages, and he had just walked into its latest chapter. Sci-Fi stood beneath a lattice of refracted light, her crystalline form scattering faint rainbows across the chamber walls. Ethan placed the stolen archive shard onto a projection node, and cold data unfolded between them. Helixes twisted, annotations labeled sanitization, cultural correction, template selection. Serapha's facets brightened, then dimmed in calculated sequence. "The evidence is substantial," her voice chimed within his mind, stripped of emotion yet edged with alarm. Naira crossed her arms. "Substantial enough to risk extinction?" Sci-Fi turned her gaze toward Ethan. "Exposure will trigger full Overseer countermeasures. Oxygen rationing, quarantine seals, memory purges." Ethan met her unblinking stare. "Then we don't survive quietly. We survive publicly." Silence stretched, filled only by the hum of distant systems. Finally, crystalline ridges formed along Serapha's forearms, hardening into translucent shields. "I will hold their force," she said. "Briefly," Ethan exhaled. Brief was all they needed to make the galaxy watch. They found Alara suspended above a ring of silent resonance pillars, her wings folded tight, as if she felt the station's strain. Ethan wasted no time. He projected fragments of the archive through his wrist tag, sterile phrases hanging in the air like verdicts. Ilara's song faltered, the harmonic field around her fracturing into dissonant tones. "They bend life as if it were clay," she whispered, grief vibrating through the chamber. Naira stepped forward. "We need your key." Ilara closed her eyes, listening beyond the station's walls, beyond the Convergence's artificial hum. Slowly, she shifted pitch, voice weaving through the pillars. Panels along the ceiling responded, seams glowing faintly. The broadcast core answers to harmony, she said, breath unsteady. I can unlock it, but the strain will tear through my lattice. Ethan met her gaze. If we fail, no one chooses again. Alara spread her wings, resonance building like a storm about to break. Sin materialized as a thin lattice of light above a fractured console, its form flickering between solid and code. Overseer firewalls escalating, it transmitted, voice devoid of panic, yet threaded with urgency. Streams of encrypted glyphs cascaded across the air, colliding like sparks in a storm. Ethan watched as entire data pathways blinked red and vanished. They're isolating us, Naira muttered. Sin's lattice tightened, redirecting power from non-essential systems. Lights dimmed across distant corridors. Gravity fluctuated, shuddering under recalibration. I am diverting security oversight to subroutine echoes, Sin stated. Window of invisibility, 72 seconds. Sarafa braced near the chamber entrance, crystalline shields catching stray pulses. Ilara's resonance trembled, straining against counter-frequencies pushing back. Sin's glow intensified, threads weaving through hostile code with surgical precision. This is not combat, it added calmly. It is correction. Somewhere deep within the station, an alarm faltered. For a heartbeat, the overseers were blind. The station lights snapped to ultraviolet as the first security sweep initiated. Ethan felt the shift instantly. The air pressure tightened, filters recalibrating with a mechanical hiss. Drones descended from ceiling recesses like metallic predators, scanning for unauthorized biosignatures. Sin's diversion flickered out, and red targeting grids sliced across the corridor. Move, Naira whispered, her form blurring as she matched the wall's texture. Sarafa advanced ahead, crystalline shields flaring as the first stun pulse ricocheted in a cascade of white sparks. The blast rattled Ethan's bones. He ducked behind a fractured conduit while Ilara's voice cut through the chaos, releasing a sharp harmonic burst that scrambled drone optics. Two machines spiraled into the deck. More emerged. The sweep tightened, calculating angles, oxygen metrics, containment probabilities. Ethan's wrist tag flashed Purge Protocol active. This wasn't pursuit anymore. It was containment. And the overseers were done pretending. A violent shudder rippled through the convergence, and the air thinned instantly. Ethan's wrist tag recalibrated with brutal clarity. O2 allocation reduced by 40%. They're rationing by zone, Sin transmitted. Non-compliant sectors penalized. The corridor ahead sealed, isolating them inside a shrinking pocket of breathable atmosphere. Naira's voice came sharp. They're suffocating us without firing a shot. Sarafa's shields flickered weaker, crystalline edges frosting as condensation formed in the cold air. Ethan's mechanic instincts surged. He tore open a maintenance panel, exposing braided oxygen lines feeding an adjacent gallery. A manual override lever resisted, locked behind alien glyphs. 30 seconds, Sin warned. Ethan jammed his multi-tool into the coupling and twisted until metal screamed. The seal ruptured, air flooding in with a violent gust that knocked him backward. Ilara steadied him mid-fall. For now. Breath returned. But the overseers had turned survival into leverage. The air stabilized, but something else shifted beneath Ethan's skin. A faint, iridescent pattern pulsed along his forearms, reacting to the pressure fluctuations like living circuitry. Naira saw it first. It's accelerating, she whispered. Ethan felt heat coil through his veins. Not pain, but integration. His wrist tag flickered, unable to classify his own biometrics. A drone swept past the corridor entrance, scanning, then hesitated. Its targeting grid stuttered over him. confused. "Your signature no longer reads human," Sin transmitted, tone sharpened with calculation. Sarafa stepped closer, crystalline fingers hovering above the glow. "You are becoming variable." The word hung heavy. Ethan clenched his jaw as the mark flared brighter, responding to Alara's residual harmonics. The overseers wanted a template. Instead, they had triggered unpredictability. He flexed his hand, watching light ripple across alien-tinged skin. If they were rewriting him, he would choose the outcome. Survival was no longer passive. The floor lurched without warning. A shockwave tore through the corridor, followed by a thunderclap crack as an outer hull segment ruptured. Air vanished in a screaming torrent. Ethan hit the deck, fingers clawing for purchase as gravity faltered and loose panels spiraled toward the breach. His wrist tag shrieked, "Vacuum exposure." Naira slammed into him, anchoring herself to a conduit, while Serapha drove crystalline spikes into the deck. Forming jagged holds, Alara's wings flared, generating a countercurrent that slowed their slide. Across the chamber, debris and 2 security drones vanished into the widening tear, crushed to sparks against the void. Frost bloomed instantly along exposed surfaces. Ethan's lungs burned as the last breathable pocket thinned. He forced himself forward, hauling toward an emergency seal wheel spinning wildly near the breach. If he missed it, the convergence would vent them into endless dark. Ethan slammed the emergency seal into place, and the breach shrieked closed with a grinding clang that rattled his teeth. Pressure crawled back slowly, thin but survivable. Sin projected a trembling schematic into the air, a 3-dimensional map of the convergence rotating above his palm of light. "Primary broadcast hub located beneath the central gravity well," it transmitted. "Overseer presence confirmed." Red corridors pulsed across the hologram, marking lockdown zones expanding outward like infection. "They're hurting us," Naira said, eyes scanning escape vectors. Sarafa traced crystalline fingers through the projection, isolating maintenance shafts threading toward the core. Alara's wings folded tight as she studied harmonic access points. Ethan memorized the route instinctively, the way he would trace wiring through an engine block. "Shortest path runs through unpressurized sections," Sin added. Silence fell. Ethan met their gazes. "Then we move fast and carry our own air." The maintenance shaft forked into 2 tunnels, barely wide enough for a single body. One route pulsed with faint blue indicators, stable pressure, slower but safer. The other was dark, airless, cutting straight toward the gravity well beneath the broadcast hub. Ethan's wrist tag projected survival probabilities, numbers fluctuating with brutal honesty. 40% if they split, 30% if they stayed together through vacuum. Behind them, distant impacts echoed, security units recalibrating. "We lose time on the lit path," Naira said quietly. Serapha's crystalline surface reflected Ethan's hesitation in fractured shards. Alara touched the wall, listening to harmonic vibrations traveling through metal. "The dark tunnel is shorter," she confirmed, "but lethal without cohesion." Ethan inhaled, tasting recycled air and fear. He could choose caution and likely lose the hub, or gamble everything on speed. The overseers were closing in. He met their eyes and stepped toward the airless passage. "Together," he said. The airless tunnel spat them into a circular chamber wrapped in humming blue light. At its center, a translucent barrier curved from floor to ceiling, rippling like frozen water. Beyond it, the gravity well spiraled downward toward the broadcast hub. Ethan's borrowed oxygen pack ticked down, in sharp, unforgiving intervals. "Quantum phase shield," Sin transmitted. "Adaptive. Responds to intent." As if summoned, armored sentinels dropped from ceiling ports behind them, weapons charging with silent efficiency. Naira's skin blurred, attempting to confuse targeting grids, while Serapha stepped forward, crystalline edges hardening. Ilara's wings vibrated, harmonics testing the barrier's frequency. Ethan pressed his palm against the field. It flared violently, rejecting him with a concussive pulse that threw him backward. The sentinels advanced. The shield wasn't built to keep danger out. It was designed to keep them from reaching choice. Oxygen dwindled. Time collapsed inward like a tightening fist. Serapha slammed both palms against the phase field, crystalline fractures racing outward like lightning through ice. Ilara matched the pattern with a rising harmonic note, destabilizing the shield's frequency. For one breathless second, the barrier flickered thin. "Now!" Sin pulsed. Ethan lunged through the weak point, suit scraping against charged light, and crashed onto the central platform. The broadcast core rose before him, a ring of suspended lenses aimed toward distant stars. Oxygen alarms screamed in his ear as sentinels poured into the chamber behind. Naira vaulted through next, morphing mid-air to deflect a stun blast. Ethan slammed his wrist tag against the override node. The core ignited in blinding brilliance. Across the galaxy, screens awakened. His image, breath ragged, eyes blazing, filled worlds he would never see. "This is not a celebration," he gasped. "It's control." The overseers had tried to silence him. Instead, he was live. The chamber temperature plummeted as the air thickened with invisible pressure. Light bent inward at the center of the broadcast ring, collapsing into a shape too complex for the eye to hold. The overseer manifested as layered geometry and shifting equations, its presence vibrating through bone and circuitry alike. Sentinels froze mid-stride, awaiting command. "Transmission unauthorized," the entity intoned, voice resonating on frequencies that scraped across Ethan's skull. The live feed flickered but held. Naira steadied Ethan as his knees threatened to buckle. Serapha's shield strained, facets cracking under the sheer force of the overseer's field. Ilara's wings trembled, harmonics fraying against oppressive counterwaves. "Your species seeks direction," the overseer continued. "We provide refinement." Ethan forced himself upright, oxygen alarm shrieking in counterpoint. "Refinement without consent is extinction," he shot back. Words carried across the galaxy. The overseer's form pulsed brighter, preparing to end the broadcast by force. The overseer's field intensified, crushing the chamber with gravitational distortion. Panels buckled. The broadcast lenses cracked under invisible pressure. Sentinels advanced in disciplined arcs, firing calibrated bursts meant to disable, not kill. Oxygen alarms layered over structural warnings, creating a rising chorus of failure. Sin's lattice flickered violently as hostile code surged like a tidal wave through the network. "Signal integrity dropping," it transmitted, voice fragmenting. Naira shifted forms rapidly, absorbing one stun pulse that scorched across her shoulder. Serapha staggered, crystalline armor spiderwebbing with fractures. Ilara's harmonics faltered, drowned beneath counter-frequencies imposed by the overseer's will. Ethan felt the hybrid mark beneath his skin flare painfully, responding to forces he barely understood. Around him, the station itself seemed to reject rebellion. The galaxy was watching. But watching did not mean intervening. The Overseer extended a geometric limb toward the broadcast core. "Compliance," it commanded. The broadcast core exploded in a shower of fractured light as the Overseer's limb pierced its center. Screens across the chamber died to black. Sin's lattice collapsed into static. Voice silenced mid-transmission. Serapha's crystalline shield shattered completely. Shards scattering across the deck as she fell to one knee. Naira's morphing field flickered out, leaving her exposed beneath advancing sentinels. Ilara's wings dimmed, harmonics fading into a thin, broken note. Ethan's oxygen alarm flatlined into a steady tone. The tank on his back read, "Empty." The chamber tilted violently as gravity distorted, dragging him to the floor. The hybrid glow beneath his skin sputtered, then dulled. Across the void, the galaxy saw nothing but silence. The Overseer's presence filled the space like a verdict already passed. "Experiment concluded," it declared. Ethan lay gasping in thinning air, watching hope evaporate as completely as the oxygen around him. Sound drained from his chamber until only Ethan's ragged breathing remained, thin and burning. The sentinels stood motionless now. Mission fulfilled. Serapha lay fractured nearby, Naira unmoving, Ilara dim as dying starlight. Sin's presence was gone entirely, a silence where logic once pulsed. The Overseer's form hovered above them, immense and patient. Ethan stared at the deck, frost creeping along the metal inches from his face. He had wanted escape from a small, ordinary life. Instead, he had delivered these beings into extinction by defiance. The hybrid glow beneath his skin flickered faintly, unstable, painful. His vision blurred at the edges as oxygen deprivation tightened its grip. In the dark pressure of failing lungs, he understood something brutal. Survival was never guaranteed by rebellion alone. It required cost. It required choice. If he was to die here, it would not be as a template. It would be as himself. Ethan forced his eyes open against the frost creeping across his lashes. The hybrid mark beneath his skin pulsed once, weak but present, responding not to the Overseer, but to the fractured forms around him. He crawled toward Serapha first, pressing his glowing palm against her shattered lattice. Light bled from him into crystal. Naira stirred as he reached her next, his skin shifting instinctively to match her frequency. Ilara's dim wings answered when he touched her shoulder, a faint harmonic tremor threading through the chamber. The Overseer loomed closer, gravitational pressure building for a final purge. Ethan rose unsteadily, lungs burning, and closed his eyes. Instead of fighting alone, he let the borrowed traits merge. Shape, thought, resonance, choosing connection over resistance. The glow surged outward, not as attack, but invitation. If evolution required a bridge, he would become one willingly, not engineered, chosen. The glow ignited into a blinding sphere around Ethan, fed by Serapha's crystalline matrices, Naira's adaptive resonance, and Ilara's rising song. Thought bled into thought. Sensation multiplied. He felt Sin's dormant code flicker awake within the station grid, weaving their frequencies together. The pulse expanded in concentric waves, slipping past shattered lenses and through dormant transmitters. Spilling into the network the Overseer had tried to silence, across distant worlds. Dormant receivers sparked alive. Minds touched, not merged, not controlled, but aware. The Overseer recoiled as the wave passed through its layered geometry, not as a weapon, but as undeniable proof of voluntary connection. Gravity distortion fractured. Sentinels powered down mid-command. The chamber brightened as pressure stabilized. Ethan dropped to one knee, body shaking, energy draining from him like blood from an open wound. The pulse faded, but its echo remained in every conscious mind watching. Choice had spoken louder than design. The Overseer's structure destabilized under the weight of collective awareness. Its layered geometry flickered, equations unraveling into static. Around the chamber, control panels rebooted without command, their displays overriding purge directives. Sin's lattice reformed in trembling strands of light, reclaiming system authority piece by piece. "Overseer command hierarchy fractured," it transmitted, voice regaining coherence. Seraph arose slowly, crystalline fractures knitting together under residual harmonic energy. Naira steadied herself, adaptive field returning in cautious waves. Ilara's wings brightened, her song no longer strained but resolute. Across the convergence, containment protocols disengaged, oxygen levels normalizing. The Overseer's voice diminished from dominance to distortion. "Parameters no longer optimal," it intoned before collapsing into scattered motes of light. The experiment had depended on secrecy and inevitability. Both were gone. Ethan lay exhausted at the center of the chamber as alarms ceased. The convergence was no longer a laboratory. It was accountable. Silence settled over the convergence, heavy and unfamiliar without alarms. Emergency lights shifted from red to steady white, revealing the scars left across the chamber: fractured crystal, scorched plating, shattered lenses hanging like broken stars. Ethan pushed himself upright, muscles trembling from drained reserves. Oxygen flowed freely again, but each breath felt earned rather than given. Sarafa stood nearby, restored yet altered, faint seams visible within her lattice. Naira moved slower than before, adaptive field flickering cautiously as if relearning equilibrium. Ilara's wings glowed softly, harmonics subdued into something reflective. Sin hovered above them, stabilizing systems that no longer answered to a single will. Across distant screens, messages from countless civilizations streamed in. Confusion, anger, gratitude, possibility. The Overseers were gone, but uncertainty replaced them. Ethan understood then that survival was not triumph. It was responsibility. He had torn down control. Now every species would have to decide what to build instead. In the days that followed, the convergence transformed from spectacle to assembly. Representatives once confined to scripted encounters now gathered in open forums, their differences exposed without filtration. Sin projected shared protocols, drafted not by overseer decree, but by collective vote. Oxygen, energy, and transit lanes were no longer tools of compliance but negotiated resources. Sarafa contributed structural algorithms for transparent governance. Naira proposed adaptive treaties, allowing cultural evolution without forced synthesis. Ilara anchored sessions with harmonic calibration, preventing escalation into violence. Ethan stood among them not as template, but witness, his hybrid mark faint yet permanent beneath his skin. A new principle circulated across systems and screens. No species would be altered without consent. No future engineered without participation. It was not perfect. It was fragile, but it belonged to those living it. Ethan felt the weight of that shift settle in his chest heavier than any gravity well. Weeks later, Ethan stood in an open hangar carved into the outer ring of the Convergence, beyond the transparent hull. Nebulae drifted like slow-burning embers against infinite dark. He knelt beside a damaged shuttle engine, hands blackened with conductive dust instead of desert grease. The machine's core sputtered irregularly, foreign yet familiar in its broken rhythm. He adjusted a misaligned coupling, feeling vibrations through metal the way he once had in a small Arizona garage. Behind him, Sarafa discussed structural recalibration with Sin, while Naira and Alara watched traffic flow across newly negotiated corridors. No alarms screamed, no fields crushed the air. The hybrid glow beneath Ethan's skin pulsed faintly. Stable. He tightened the final bolt, and the engine ignited in smooth resonance. For the first time since his abduction, he felt grounded, not owned, not selected, simply a mechanic among stars, choosing where to stand. In the end, Ethan did not win by force, but by choice. He proved that survival is not about domination or design, but about connection freely made. The stars remained vast and uncertain, yet no longer controlled by unseen architects. If this journey moved you, subscribe and follow for more cinematic sci-fi tales where humanity faces the unknown and decides who it truly wants to become.